What happens when you take World of Warcraft, a game built for keyboard and mouse, and throw all of that out the window? You get confusion, pain, and one epic journey. I'm starting from scratch and I'm taking on Mythic Plus dungeons all the way to Keystone Hero, using nothing but this. Oh boy. No mouse, no keyboard, just me, a controller, and the worst control scheme ever inflicted on Azeroth. Is it even possible? Let's find out. Welcome to Zero to Hero Controller Edition. Before we dive into this crazy challenge, let's lay down the rules first. I won't be using the new one-button rotation feature or that fancy rotation helper. This is going to be gameplay on a class and spec I barely understand with a control scheme I've never touched before. And the class that I've chosen for this challenge is the Elemental Shaman. Because what better way to learn a spec you're completely unfamiliar with mid-dungeon on a controller? To make this all even possible in the first place, I had to get the console port add-on, which allows you to use any controller and additionally throws your UI all over the place to get it somewhat functional for controller play. The second I loaded into the game with the add-on, I regretted everything about this video. Before I even stepped foot into my first dungeon, I had to learn how to walk. And I mean that almost literally. Although it looks easy, it's way harder to navigate your character on a controller if you're used to 15 years of mouse and keyboard. The first 15 minutes I had to rewire my brain, and after accepting my fate for the near future, I did what any new player would do. I stood in front of the target dummy for 2 hours, throwing lightning bolts, chain lightnings, misclicking my hearthstone, opening my character panel and exiting the game. All these menu buttons annoyed the hell out of me, so I made the decision to remove all those buttons from my controller so this wouldn't happen mid-dungeon. Half of my time spent here was trying to remember which button did what, and the other half was rebinding everything again because this all just felt weird. The worst part about it all was that I initially thought that Elemental Shaman was an easy spec, but boy was I wrong. I quickly realized that this spec is all about managing procs, timing bursts, and maintaining certain buffs. And if I randomly pressed Thunderstorm mid-rotation, which happened a lot by the way, all my damage would fly out the window. But slowly, very slowly, things started to click, kind of. Initially, I casted all my spells confused like a Pokemon, but now I was starting to cast with intention instead. It wasn't clean or fast, but it was progress. This was also the moment where I realized that I could also confuse my teammates by doing this. Spinning became my coping mechanism. If you see this in a dungeon, just know I'm losing my mind. At this point I felt ready for my first dungeon. I found a friendly +2 Theater of Pain group and decided to jump into it knowing I wouldn't be judged for the performance I was going to lay on the table in a few minutes. Now, if you're an Elemental Shaman main, and keep your eyes closed until I tell you to open them up again. This was the moment where I realized that I was definitely not ready for a dungeon. These enemies were nothing like a target dummy. They cast spells, move around, and mess up my concentration. Here, I also knew that I had to go back to the training range later and rebind one certain, pretty important spell and a tap target hotkey on my controller, so I could kick the casters in the dungeons. For a +2, it wasn't really that necessary, but if I wanted to complete +10s, I had to learn how to kick on this thing. On the first boss, I somehow pulled aggro on one of the mobs and got one shot right after I pressed all my cooldowns, including Bloodlust. Well, almost all of them, since I didn't even acknowledge Ascension's existence in this run yet. Anyways, I reincarnate and we kill the boss without any big problems and get thrown into the lower segment of the dungeon. Everything up until the next boss went fairly smooth as one can be with the controller in their hand. Zav, the Unfallen, proved to be a pain in my ass though. For anyone who doesn't know the mechanics of this boss has a set rotation of spawning a banner that slows you and casting a sequence of AoE abilities that force you to move out of them. This part is usually not that big of a problem, but having to manage changing targets to the banner, moving your camera and moving your character with the controller at the same time proved to be harder than one might think. His second mechanic throws 2 DPS into the arena, forcing them to duel to the death. The winner gets a huge DPS buff, and unfortunately I got picked for that part. As you might see, the Hunter also didn't have the best DPS in the world, so once we got thrown into the arena, I just let go of my controller and let him kill me, since I knew I wouldn't have a chance with my handicap. Moving on to Gorechomp, I got relatively comfortable with the movement, so dodging the hooks wasn't really that big of an issue. At some point, the healer died and the ads started focusing me, but we got Gorechomp down before it was too late. I tried rezzing him, but in order for me to do that, I had to aim my crosshair on his corpse, which means my Black Ops 2 on the PlayStation 3 skills had to come in every time I wanted to res somebody. After rezzing, I made my way to the hooks that are supposed to pull me upward, and that's when I realized that I can't. I didn't bind any of my buttons to interact with objects, so I just stood there, confused. Before wasting another 30 minutes trying to figure out where that keybind even is, I decided to interact with the hook with my mouse. For this run only. This next part really showed me how important kicks really are. These Bone Magi have a really dangerous spell called Bone Spear, which basically one-shots anyone they cast it on, which obviously means that we all got obliterated by them. We still managed to push through and fight Kulthorok, which proved to be quite tricky with this group. It felt like no one in this run except me and the tank knew what to do here, so everyone except him eventually died, but since he was so overgeared, he was able to clutch it out and we got to move on to the last boss, who was pretty simple and went down very smoothly. Everyone did their mechanics, and with the Death Knight's grip, we were able to cleave down the ads quickly, ending this run with 22 deaths. After this atrocious run, I went back to the target dummies and rebound some things, and added a few weak auras to track my Tempest charges. At this point, I also realized that I never used Frost Shock and the Ice Fury talent, which cost me a lot of my damage, so I also tried adding that to my rotation. 30 minutes later, I was now really confident that I was ready this time, and jumped into my second run, a +2 Dark Flame Cleft. As you can see in my DPS, I got pretty comfortable with the controls and my rotation, so I tried adding tap targeting and kicking enemies abilities into my rotation. I had to get used to this clunky maneuvering for kicks if I wanted to reach my destination of Keystone Hero. The only thing I couldn't get rid of is the random usage of Thunderstorm and the autistic spins every now and then. On the first boss, Old Waxbeard, I was impressed with myself for the very first time. My rotation wasn't the cream of the crop yet, but I pulled off this insane amount of damage on pull without dying, and it really motivated me to keep on going with this challenge. One of my core issues still was focusing the right target. With this many ads running rampant, I didn't have a reliable way of targeting the boss or the explosive minecart without spamming my tap target button for 10 seconds straight. Even though everything went well with this run up to this point, everything after the first boss was a complete disaster. The tank overestimated himself, pulled half the room and died right after, which led to the rest of the group dying as well. On our second try, he did the exact same thing, with the only difference being that the healer wasn't there, which is a crucial mistake on a Brewmaster. I would know, because I main that spec. Yeah, at this point you guys should know that I like to suffer in video games. Anyways, on our third try we managed to kill this pack, only for us to wipe on the next one, leading to the healer leaving the key, thus ending this run. My next and last +2 run was going to be a Floodgate. At this point in time I was really comfortable with my rotation and didn't have to use much brainpower to press my buttons. I had also added an interact button so I would be able to defuse the stockpiles at the first stage of the dungeon. This dungeon was also the cleanest run of all of them up until now. We had some hiccups at the first boss with our healer and Rogue dying, but nothing detrimental. Swamp Face was also a cakewalk. Only the other shaman died, but with the rest being alive, we were able to beat the boss and proceed all the way to the end of the dungeon, where I started messing up quite a bit. I never really paid attention to the Giga Zap ability, so I always hit at least one puddle of water, and at some point I managed to hit 3 at once, which is honestly pretty impressive. This massive mistake led to some of my teammates not being able to get rid of their leaping sparks, so they ran around the room like headless chicken. But at the end of the day, we managed to kill him and once again get nothing except +164 in our rating, putting us at exactly 326. My last run of the day was going to be my own key, a +3 Rookery, and let me tell you, this was the moment where I fell in love with my spec. I did so much damage and all my buttons felt so satisfying. My group was perfect, the tank pulled big, the healer kept us all alive, and the DPS started blasting like crazy. I finally learned my core rotation, and seeing these results really put a smile on my face. But there still was a rather big issue. This dungeon taught me that enemies and bosses aren't really the threat for this challenge anymore. At least not on this Keystone level, but rather the environment. See, once you kill the first boss, Kyrios, you have to jump down this hole and pick up his feathers to glide down even further. But once again, I didn't have a button keybound to use the extra action button that pops up when you pick up the feather. So I did the only smart thing and jumped down trying to save myself right before breaking my ankles with the Gust of Wind ability. Yeah, But you know what? I won't add another button to my already complex keybinds. I'll just learn to jump down better. The rest of the dungeon went by in a flash. And like expected, we finished the dungeon with ease and finally got our first item. Well, technically the priest got it, but he was kind enough to give the staff to me, raising my item level from 619 to 623. With the completion of this dungeon, we also end the day with a satisfying 505 rating. This whole episode was just a warm-up though. My next run was going to be a +5 DFC, which proved to be a real challenge with the addition of affixes now. Who will die first, me or my controller? Hit that sub button and like this video if you want to catch episode 2 coming very soon. And if you got tips, tricks, or just want to flame my shaman gameplay, leave your thoughts down below. I hope you guys have a great day and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and you shaman mains can open your eyes again, by the way.